but it's not a good thing. It's basically this page it's the thing you wish you had with your sales reps when they misbehave, and you could document it, and every sales manager after them sees it. So it's like this person lies on their, like, whatever, calls they made. So they have to carry that to their next duty station. Well, there's this thing called a page 11, which is where they put all that crap in the Marine Corps or in the military. So it's like all these things that you did wrong. So it's basically the permanent record they threaten you with in your high school days is a real thing. Yeah. It's just not so real in the civilian world.
Yeah. All right. I'll avoid that, I guess.
Yeah, great. So guys, we got, so we've been training. So today, so Sean, where we're at in our thing, we're in phase 2 of sales platoon. So phase 1 is basically sales training. So it's 2 weeks intensive boot camp, as you would imagine, everything to do with selling. So we use CRM, we use HubSpot Enterprise, we use Sales Navigator, we use Adept Prospecting. And so they're learning how to build lead lists, put them together, overcome objections, all that stuff. They're also learning how to run one-on-one sales meetings. They're learning how to do forecasting, learning all that stuff. So the whole gamut. And then also just the nomenclature of what a sales team looks like, from sales rep to sales manager to VP, and then sales ops, sales enablement, sales management, how sales fits in the overall organizational structure. And then walking through a simple, essentially 7-stage sales cycle that's really 4-stage, so the prospect, demo, proposal, and negotiate, but they're learning that. Now we're in phase 2, which we call sales engagement training, which is they're actually taking those leads that they've qualified, doing the 10-step qualification process of LinkedIn, Sales Navigator connection requests, no sales pitch, just connect, send some insight, go to the CRM, send the introductory email, then working through that. That's where we're at now as we're doing that outreach. It's more or less a captive 2 weeks of training, engagement, then retraining, training, engagement, retraining. Then they'll move to phase 3, which is essentially their indentured servitude, where they work for sales platoon and are run just like a regular sales team, morning sales huddles, sales team calls, outbound. They got metrics. We run dashboards. They understand how to show up for the calls prepared. And their capstone is at the end of the time, they do a quarterly business review. So they review the work they did, the pipeline they have, they hand it off to the next class. And then they should go into an apprenticeship with an organization who wants to take them on for 90 days or so, up to 6 months. And then that's a paid apprenticeship, or, they can direct hire them. And so they're calling into companies now. So they're basically targeting you, a VP of sales at a company that may have an open position, and say, hey, by the way, I happen to be a U.S. military member, active duty, and I come with a tax credit of up to X dollars just for hiring me, but I'm going to come pre-onboarded, pre-trained. So that's where we're at. And then they go to hire.
Nice.
Part of that is they're also selling virtual instructor-led training onboarding. So during COVID, it's like a lot of us as sales managers, it's like, I'm not used to having to hire junior sales reps and onboarding them. So outsource that to us. Like, I'm already doing that with Sales Platoon. If I can take military members and train them, I can probably take your team that's new. So we'll outsource it, onboard them through your process, and that way you can show up to you. So we're adding more products, as you could say.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's the background.
You're just repeating the same program that you're running these guys? You're repeating basically the same program you're running these guys, sir?
Except for it depends upon, I've come up with 3 levels of it. So the basic one is just like your first week of onboarding you would normally do with them, like do the pre-week with us. So you've got a candidate that you're ready to hire, but you're not quite sure yet. Send them through our program for a week. And then at the end of the week, I can either give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And that way, at least they know basic sales training. They've gotten exposure to your CRM and your processes. We can make it 2 weeks, but the goal is to give you that little bit of a, demo, when you hire people, probably do something I do and say, look, your first 90 days is essentially part of the interview process. And at the end of 2 weeks, at the end of the week, we're going to get together into the first month and into the first 90 days. If it doesn't work out, hey, we gave it a shot. But you start with that because you want them to be shocked and get some HR complaint in 90 days when you're like, you didn't work. They ought to know at 90 days they didn't work. Yeah. So
that's usually your recruiter fee cutoff too. So usually pays off well. That's usually when your recruiter fee cutoff is too, right?
Well, yeah. And that's what sucks is that, when you're a sales leader and you use sales recruiters, they have no skin in the game.
Right.
90 days, you can barely tell if they're even able to sell yet after 90 days. Right. So that's the whole point of what we're doing with these guys is they've already gone through a minimum of 90 days. So they've already been de-risked, and they've gotten HubSpot inbound sales certification already. they're going through my personal sales certification, and then they're going to get a third credential, and they're also doing a lot of LinkedIn learning. So they're going to be certified LinkedIn Sales Navigator, HubSpot, my particular sales process, which we've started talking about. So a lot of that stuff. And then essentially what I'm doing is saying like, hey, Sean, you don't want to have to deal with onboarding all these guys. You have enough issues going on, especially virtually. We'll take that over so that you can go focus on what you want to do. And whether you find the talent or we find the talent, if we find the talent, then there's a higher fee than if they find the talent. Because if you find it, then we're just training them. But if we find it, then we'll just add it in. The goal is for it to be no more than the cost of what a retained search firm would cost you. But you're getting pre-trained on more than the rest. So anyway, I didn't mean to get into this, but so Sean was the guy. So Sean basically created MarketWire in the States. So the company that I inherited, they know all my stories. So when Sean left the company, the guys were like, if Sean's not here, I don't want to be here. It was basically like the philosophy. So I walked into Jared Marcel and Clay Manoff and all these guys, Kevin Foreman, I think was his name. But there were these guys that he had built this team up, a really strong team. So Sean really understands like how to take a young team, nothing, and build it and pull it together. It was really impressive what he put in place. But he was like a great architect that when he left, nobody took care of the building. So like managers took all the reps, and then what was left when I got there was like this skeleton crew, really dedicated, yet people that were like, well, if you're not Sean, and then after I had to win them over, and eventually like, all right, you're not as good as Sean, but at least you're here, so that's good, and you seem to care. So that's 2 strikes against you that are going in your favor. So Sean and I kept wanting to try to meet, and we'd reach out or whatever, and we never really got to. And then, as you guys know, for a while, I was really involved heavily in culture index leadership stuff. That's what we finally connected on. We had to sit down, and I realized why Darren Walter, who was both of our shared boss, wanted us to meet. The guy is like salt of the earth, one of the best sales leaders I've met, like truly cares about his people. It's evident in the people that I inherited from him, and in the short period of time I got to spend with his class, or his people that we met when we did the culture index. So as I work to try to expose you guys to sales leaders who have worked themselves up, who know what sales talent look like, I'm trying to expose you to the best leaders I know, for them just to tell their story, how they get into sales, and then just let Sean talk. And it's basically Sean's show for, as long as we block till 1, but you can leave at 12:45 or whenever you need to, just to hear your story, man, and answer any questions, because we're just, so thanks for taking the time to meet with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do it. Looking forward to it. Thank you guys all for your service, first of all. And thanks for the kind words, Raleigh. I think you probably inflated some of that, but I appreciate it. So where do you want to go? Where do you want to start?
I guess tell us a little bit about what you do now at ASUG, what that role entails kind of on a, general basis, as a VP of sales. And then, let's go. And then from that, I want to pivot and go back to how it all started. Like little Sean woke up one day, was 6 years old, and said, I'm going to grow a vegetable garden. Like, how'd you end up in sales?
Well, that didn't happen. Early punchline. Yeah, sure. So ASUG is a community around SAP. If you guys are familiar with SAP, they're one of the 5 largest software companies globally. They're kind of the back end, really, to any company that makes things. Buying, selling, they're really the back end operations that kind of powers all of that. And their product is probably close to 40 years old, super complicated. It's German engineered. So it's meant to be, sort of this black box that nobody can touch or figure out by design. So our company kind of exists because they've got about 50,000 customers. They've got 19,000 partners who service those customers because they can't service them all directly. And so we kind of sit, if you think of sort of like a Venn diagram, we kind of sit between those 3. We at the end of the day, our primary goal is to help the customers maximize their investment in SAP. But we kind of have to toe all of those lines, right? Because we have to work closely with SAP. They give us access to their senior leadership team, their products, their marketing team, the way they're thinking about talking to their customers. But they see us as really, basically, if you break it down to one thing, we're really the voice of all of their customers. Well, North America anyway, which is a couple thousand customers. And collectively, sort of the rising tides analogy, right? If we can collectively bring in the voice of a couple thousand customers, it's a lot stronger than, Microsoft or Boeing or anybody can do by themselves. So then that's our core product is we basically bring that community together. We put out a bunch of content. We do a bunch of events that kind of work with that. We do education and training. And then the last piece is back to that partner ecosystem. So we understand that a lot of those partners have good offerings, and it's sort of a matchmaking, if you will. We help those partners get in front of the customers to solve problems that they're trying to figure out, whether that's, implementing a new software that they just purchased, or, upgrading an old one they've got in place, integrating things like that. And so that's kind of the last piece, is we're also bringing those partners in to help the partners find customers, and vice versa, the customers to find somebody to help them resolve their problems. So my particular role in the company is I'm head of all sales and actually business development. So all revenue flows through me. I've got kind of 4 or 5 different business units, the ones I just described basically. And then I'm also in charge of, when I say business development, that means kind of new partnerships, as well as I would call it product development. We haven't historically thought of ourselves as a software or SaaS company, but that's my background. And so I think that way. And that's where I'm kind of layering. Our core product is, hey, join our community, but then I'm layering multiple products on top of that to say, how can we help you next? Very much like a Salesforce would do, right? Or SAP is a good example. So you buy their core product, which is ERP, then the next thing you can buy is their HR platform and their finance product, and so on. And so we think that same way of, once you're part of the community, what else can we do to help you? Does that help give you kind of a high-level overview?
It does. So a little bit about the structure you have now and how that's divvied up. Like, how does it work for your different divisions and things?
Yeah, good question. So I've got the partner division, the events division, education and training, and then community. Those are kind of our 4 lines of business, if you will. And then each of them have slightly different structure, but most of them basically have a sales leader, and then individual contributors that report up to them. And most of those, the individual contributor or sellers, we carve out into new business and account managers or existing business. Couple of them, there is a hybrid role. And then at the front end of that is an SDR, or a sales development rep, the person who's kind of warming up the pipeline, right? So you kind of flow that through. That's sort of the customer journey. Is the first thing is they talk to an SDR. We actually happen to outsource that function. It's just not one that I wanted to own. There's great outsource guys that, anyway, so that's outsourced for us, but they basically are actually the first voice to our prospects. So they'll go out, we give them lead lists, target lists, and so on, and they go out and find us. Essentially, they basically put calendar meetings on our new sellers on their calendars. They send us over some notes and say why it's qualified, things like that, so we can make sure it's worth our time going in. And then we have a weekly checkpoint with them. But so they're the first step. They kick that over. Then our new business sellers go in and work that deal. We were a pretty quick sales cycle. We're less than 3 months on average. Then that person kind of runs through, obviously, if they join. If they don't join, they go back into our marketing automation. If they do join, they get kicked over to our customer success managers. And that team leads. They each manage more than I want, but it's the way my budget works today is they each manage about 350 customers, which is way too many. So I came in about a year and a half ago, and they really didn't have any sales structure or process. It actually, as kind as Raleigh was, it was probably the mess I left him, where you had some folks in place, but you really needed to like redesign the whole thing. And so I've been kind of stepping through the things I've learned through the years and changing these, and that structure didn't exist. They basically had a bunch of, I would call them customer service reps, who, when you had a problem, you called us, we'd answer and help you and do it, fast with a smile on our face, but it wasn't strategic. It wasn't really business professionals who understood, and it wasn't, quite frankly, it was customer friendly, but it wasn't customer centric, I guess I would say. It was tactical, not strategic. And so we've built that model out, and this customer success manager, my first one actually just celebrated his 1 year. So we're we're in that stage of proving that it works. And, it takes, obviously, it takes, as you guys are seeing, 3 to 6 months to ramp an individual. It takes another 3 to 6 months to ramp the performance on top of that. So we're kind of right in the last quarter or so, we've really seen the fruits of that labor. I think I covered everything in terms of structure. Oh, and then on top of that, I've got a few roles that overarch. So I've got a couple like operational people. Some of the things we do are events and things like that. So I've got some operational people that help with logistics and those types of things. And then I've got a sales operations person who sits over the data and the customer information, my financial metrics, all of that. He sits across those 4 business units as well. I think that's it. So it's about 20 people or so.
Okay. And then do you guys, so one of the things that we talk a lot about, I like quadrants when I teach, right? I always talk about, 4 quadrants of sellers, BDRs, which you talked on, account executives, account managers, and then client sales, right? Account managers are kind of relationship managers. Client sales sell the second or third product. Account executives sell the first product, and BDRs give you the lead. And there's the same thing in a sales organization where you have 4 quadrants again, and you essentially have salespeople, which those 4 fall underneath. Then you have management, managers, directors, VPs, the rest. And you have sales ops, which is the business and the data and metrics of selling. And then you have sales enablement, which is the whole supporting structure around like, how do you sell? Really, sales trainers and all that. You said you have a sales ops person. Do you guys have like an official sales enablement side as well? Or do you outsource a lot of that? How do you work that? Or do you have to do all that yourself? Give me the sense of like what that looks like at your company. Yeah,
really good question. That's my next. So all of these roles, literally, in spite of the my CFO pushing me on numbers, I've changed all these roles, as I said. So we didn't have customer success managers, we didn't have sales ops. Sales enablement is actually the next one that's on my list. I think what we'll probably end up doing, because we're a pretty small company, is we will actually make that not necessarily a sales enablement, but probably just a generic role across the whole company. And once we kind of prove that works to onboard and train kind of generically our people, then I think the next phase will be for me to roll out a sales enablement person. So we don't have it today. It's on my list. Each step I prove works, I get more credibility to go do another step, right? And kind of get that ask for a new role and budget and headcount. So ops was the last one we're doing, and that one's paying off as well. And so I anticipate I'll get enablement at some point. Obviously, COVID delayed probably most decisions by 6 months or more, but as we think about next year, it's a potential role. So I actually do it myself today, Raleigh. I'm actually in the middle, maybe 75% of the way through building out. It's interesting. I mean, as you said, I've got a lot of junior folks. We're technically a non-for-profit the way we're structured. That's just because we have our total addressable market's pretty small. You have to be an SAP customer to do business with us. So that limits us to 8 to 10,000 companies or so. You also have to be in North America. So because of that, we're structured as a nonprofit, even though we actually turn a profit every year, which we have to pay taxes on, and it's a really goofy setup. But because we're a nonprofit, we're not paying what the sales forces are of the world. So I'm kind of limited in terms of who I can hire. I have to hire fairly junior people, train them, invest a bunch of time. I personally kind of love doing that anyway, so I don't mind it. But it's harder than going and hiring somebody that's a 15-year vet and you can plug them in and they're up and running in a couple months.
Muted myself. So can you tell us a little bit about that? So I think it'll be a nice segue into your own background. So, I always say that, when I'm training these guys and talking through sales careers, we had Kyle Evangelista. I don't know if you know him or not. He's from Guerrero Media. He's VP of sales over there. Good guy to know him. You guys are very similar DNA. We're all kind of like that same young, hungry kind of, work our way up.
Yeah.
But he's built a great organization over there. And one of the things that he said that was interesting is, a sales role is the only job in the world, one of them, where you keep the same title for 20 years and you can earn considerably more money every year. So you can be a sales rep in coming out of college and making 80K, 60K a year, and then you can be a sales executive at, you know, Granger or Gartner or, you know, somewhere else and making 250, 300 or Lockton, and they're making over $1 million a year. So it's an interesting thing that you don't have to go into management necessarily to get promoted. And as a matter of fact, as a sales manager, you generally make less than your highest performing rep.
Yep.
And a little discouraging. So can you talk a little bit around like the track, you know, as it goes? Like maybe you can use ASUG as an example, even though it's a lower pay. I think it's good to set it up like, hey, here's what you come in as, here's what your career trigger actually looks like this way or internally, and then how it works management wise, and then talk about your own decision to go into management. And I think that would be 2 good talk tracks.
Yeah, sure. So I'll think through that a little bit. I agree with you in terms of, it's a conversation I have with really all of my team members anywhere I've been in my career is, you know, where are you today? Where do you want to go? Right. What does that look like? What are your strengths? And sometimes those don't match up, right? Sometimes people think, oh, I just want to get the title and I want to be a manager. And you start talking to them and their strengths are, you know, that they're a good individual contributor. Or let me say their other way, their weaknesses are they're not good at leading people. We've all seen people that aren't good at that are give them a task and they're really good at it and they can do that, but you know, ask them to lead a group of people to do tasks and it doesn't work. And as Raleigh said, sometimes it's like all I want is you know, to do my job and 9 to 5 make as much money as possible and not worry about it. Well, you shouldn't be thinking about management either. And you know, I've had a lot of those in my career where, you know, I had a rep who made $1 million a year and she was 50, approaching 50. To your point, Raleigh, she had been an account executive, maybe a senior account executive her entire career. And she knew what she wanted to be and she was totally fine with that. She tried management, I think, at one point in her career for a year or two. And it was like the only time in her career she didn't hit her numbers. So, right. I always tell people at the end of the day, you know yourself better than anybody. When you look yourself in the mirror and you say, what am I good at? What am I not at? You know, just think about those things. Because even if you decide, okay, not management, I want to sell, there's a lot of factions of that, right? As we talked about, that could be the front end BDR person who's gearing up appointments. That could be the new business person. That could be the account manager. That could be the upseller. And so I've had same thing where people are like, well, I want to go in new business because it's considered the, you know, the sexiest part of sales. And I think I can make the most money there. And, you know, I remember actually was at MarketWire. I don't know if she was still there, Raleigh, or not, but this woman named Siobhan, and she made that pivot in her career and I almost had to fire her, because she went from one of our top performers to just tanking. She was at like 60% of her number. We sat down and realized basically what she was doing was she wasn't bringing in any new customers. She was spending all of her time with her existing customers. Yep. Well, at that time we had hybrid roles. We didn't have new and retained. So it was upside down. In other words, she wasn't bringing in any new customers. Her peers were losing customers like crazy. So we flip-flopped it. I went to the CEO and said, hey, can I try this new role? I want to give all the existing book to her. You know, her retention rate is like 85%. Her new business number is like 20%. And the 3 other reps on the team were the exact opposite. So we tested it. She ended up being like one of the top performers in that business. But I think there's a lot of factions in there, right? Do you want to go down leadership? Do you want to stay in an IC role? If you're in either of those, which part of that? And I think you just have to kind of look at your core and understand where your strengths and weaknesses are, at least in my experience.
Yeah. So what led it for you? So what was your background and, you know, how did you end up in, you know, before MarketWired or at MarketWired, and then where you're at now? How did that end up working for you?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of luck, I would say, first of all. But I think, you know, my background fairly briefly is I wrestled all the way through college. I was part of some pretty successful teams. We won, we were the #1 team in the country, actually, in high school. We won 3 state titles in a row. My college team, we were kind of always top 5 or 10 in the country. We were pretty successful. And in part of that, I think a lot of that translated to work for me. It was a good work ethic, good discipline. I just kind of naturally evolved into a leadership role in somehow in all of that. I think my mom was a teacher, my dad was a CFO. I think a lot of that instilled in me sort of this interesting background of like financially driven, but also being sort of being able to get in front of people and being somewhat extroverted. Although I think by nature I'm actually introverted, but so I toggle between those two. So, for me, and why wrestling was such a big translation for me was it's a team sport, because you're operating in a team environment. But at the end of the day, you're out there, like it's your single match. It's you and one other guy, and you either win or you lose because of your preparation leading up to that and your execution in the moment. And so that accountability for me really translated over into sales and just my career. And I quite frankly stumbled into it. I got a degree in marketing. I remember my advisor was like, why aren't you going into sales? And I was like, I want marketing and advertising. I want to make people laugh and, get rid of all these like shitty commercials. And he's like, you're cut out for sales. People rally behind you. You like helping people. And so I went out and looked for jobs in both marketing and sales, and quite frankly, kind of stumbled into it, and hit MarketWire and just started really geeking out about it and understanding that it was a really good fit for me. And I've been in technology kind of startups ever since. MarketWire was the first one on the journey to 100 million, and then the company I just left about a year ago, we did that again. We went to 100 million, and then they IPO'd actually. So. That's a little bit of my background and how I kind of got into sales. How I went up from there was a lot of the same type of story, right? Just kind of grinding. I remember when Darren hired me, actually, Raleigh mentioned Darren. He was the head of sales at MarketWire. I actually was the first hire in Chicago. So they brought a manager out from California who was a terrible leader. And I was the first rep in Chicago, and I would just, most of the company was in California. And so basically I would get in at like 6:30 in the morning. I'd bang out like 50 calls by like 9 o'clock. And I was like, I know these guys, they're in LA. They're going to show up at 9 LA. So that's 11 for me. By lunchtime, I'm going to post like 75 calls. So when they all come in, they're just defeated. And they're like, we're never going to catch Sean. And I did. I would get emails and it'd be like, how the hell are you already at 86 calls? Like, F you. And I just kept doing that. I just kept grinding and grinding and grinding, and then the numbers went up and the numbers went up, and eventually, a poor leader got removed, and I was given an opportunity, and I read and asked questions and learned where I could, and I tried things and I failed and I tweaked and kind of kept going from there.
Yeah, it's funny how many parallels there are between your story and mine. I was a wrestler as well. I use that analogy with these guys, I think, early in our training, that it was like, team sport, the way wrestling is or swimming is, like you train weaknesses and strengths with each other. If you're going to wrestle somebody that's thicker and stronger and shorter than you are, then during wrestling practice, you'd want to find a guy a couple weight classes bigger just to go get used to somebody that's more muscular.
Yeah.
That's really the only use of the team. And then you learn from what they do wrong and you learn from what they do right. You practice drills. But other than that, it's essentially an individual sport. And we afford a lot of opportunities, but it's a risk reward opportunity. It's not for everybody. And so we started, like when we started Sales Platoon this time, we had 6 people. One person, their command, cut it down because of COVID. And then we had somebody that decided they wanted to do hospital records administration, which is a good find for them, right? If that's what they want to do, they should do that. And then there was just another gentleman that had like a top secret clearance, and he got an offer from like Northrop Grumman. It's like, I'm like, what do they have? Sales Platoon that I have, billions of dollars, like a lot. So, but he's doing well, and we stay in touch. So this is going to continue to grow. We're going through a apprenticeship program right now, so we're going to be the first. I'll get into that another time. But so the reason for all that is, as you go out and as you started to build your network, it was different when you and I came up than it is now. Right now it's LinkedIn. And so what are the things that you see people do right when they're trying to prospect and outreach to you now as a VP of sales? I always think it's funny when people are reaching out to me as a CEO. I'm like, I literally will correct their emails. I'm like, this sucks. There's no way I will buy it from you. Like, but I can't not just get them the feedback, like, here's what you can do to improve and try me again later. And what advice do you have about, like, you know, some things to avoid, some things that people you just see all the time that are just terrible?
Can I actually add to that question as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
About, do you use LinkedIn to hire junior reps?
I have. We don't currently, but I do find it very effective. It's just we're a weird setup. We actually don't have an in-house HR. We outsource it through a PEO firm. So largely because of that, we haven't used it. We've just relied on recruiters. But I do think it's a great tool.
Okay.
What was your original question, Raleigh? Sorry, I skipped. You're eating.
Oh, full lunch. Bad timing. Original question was, as they do outreach, so there's.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Kind of worse than best practices. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think I can send some. I didn't touch on this too, but throughout my career, and I still do this. I believe. I'll give you two parts to this. That the best sellers or business professionals in general are constantly evolving, right? You could find some golden pitch that works. I promise you it's not going to work more than a couple of months, maybe 6 months. So I think constantly reading, like I try to read a book a month at minimum, a sales book a month, and then I try to read something that's kind of in my industry and maybe, you know, something that's more just general. So immersing yourselves in those. The reason I bring that up is one of my favorites, Raleigh. I don't know if I've mentioned this one to you. Is a book called Selling to Zebras. It's a, like all sales books, it's a consulting business, but it's a simple concept that breaks apart into a much more complex program. But the concept is when you're trying to sell, you might see donkeys, giraffes, dogs, goats. When you see a zebra, you know it's a zebra. There's no confusing it ever, right? It's the most unique thing. You're never going to confuse a zebra with any other animal in the world. And the concept of that is bring it to sales, is know who your ideal customer is. If you know your ideal customer, the same way like a zebra, and you can say it's a company between $1 billion and $5 billion in a retail or telecom space, and the person who's going to buy it is the head of sales, that's your zebra. And only sell the zebras. When a donkey comes knocking on your door, even if it sounds like a great opportunity, don't waste your time. And so I use that to answer your question, Raleigh, because if you know that, then just go looking for zebras, right? And when you find one, do your research to think about it. So I rolled this out at a company. We did it at Sprout. The first time I did it was a company at NetBase, and we answered those. And we would spend sometimes 10, 20 hours researching a company. We would look up, read the K's and the Q's of the company. Go look for quotes, right? Try to find the CEO talking about digital transformation, and that was a problem we solved. So at the end of the day, figure out what problem you solve and go look for people who are talking about that and use that, right? So if you could find some quote of me saying, it's really hard to ramp up my reps, that's gold, right? Use that. So the more specific, customized you can get that shows you did your research and you're reaching out because you can solve a problem, not because you want to get to your 86 dials I was doing when I was at MarketWire, the better. So the flip side of that, what doesn't work, right? When I get the generic messages. When it's just some, quite frankly, it does piss me off when someone reaches out on LinkedIn and it's just like, it's either a canned message or it's just, we've never talked. And, and furthermore, again, my mom was a teacher. So to your point, Raleigh, if there's any typo or anything in there, it could actually even be a good message and I'll still delete it. And I'm like you, I'll respond to people and I'll critique them and I'll give them advice. I'm not a jerk about it. I'll just say, hey, I'm just trying to help you here. So your next message isn't as bad as this one.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There was actually one of Grant Cardone's guys called me when I was SVP at New Horizons, and he was like trying to sell me sales training. And I was like, I kept on the phone for like half an hour. I was like, try again, nope, nope.
Yeah.
So I actually got a note from Grant with a like thing in the book, like we should talk. And I was like, not interested, just different, different
Exactly.
perspectives.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is show you did your research, right? If you can do that and you're tying to some problem that I care about, you'll have much better luck versus just trying to cram something down.
Cool. You guys have any other questions for Sean? We're already at his time. So,
yeah, I have one, sorry. So the reason I brought up the LinkedIn hiring is, would you use what you were just talking about for prospecting for a job for yourself? Like you only looking for zebras, only looking for spots that you would, thrive in, and working for companies that you have interest in, stuff like that?
Yeah, really good question. Yeah, absolutely. And I had to do it. I don't know if I mentioned this to Raleigh either before, but one time I actually was unemployed looking for a role. My CEO was timely given everything going on, but my CEO was a racist and didn't want to hire somebody because of their race. So I stood up to him and we got in a big argument, and I had to actually force him to fire me, essentially. So I was in the job market with a mortgage and kids and things. So yeah, I did exactly that, Todd. You'd find 75 jobs a day, but only 3 or 4 or 5 of them were a good fit, right? They were the type of company I'd want to work for. I would research the company, try to figure out what I could about their culture and their products and their customers. And yeah, I would absolutely recommend honing in on that, because unless you're really early, like I will tell you, my very first role, I just wanted to learn sales and I didn't care that much what it was. I took a role in manufacturing. I'd worked in manufacturing plants to help pay for college and just have spending money. My dad was a CFO of manufacturing plants. So I always had this little bit of interest in terms of how things were built and made. So there was some connection for me, but I went in knowing most likely I didn't want to do that for my whole career, but I wanted to get a foundation of working and selling. And so I did that for 2.5, 3 years. I learned that, and I moved on and found what I wanted, which was tech. And I've been in tech ever since. So, if you don't know that early on, I'd say you could maybe kind of waffle a little bit and kind of venture outside. But I certainly wouldn't go to, I don't know, selling makeup or something that you just have no connection to or no interest in or something like that, right?
Yeah, don't settle too much.
Yeah. Any others? I can go to the top of the hour if you guys want. If you guys have other questions.
Jared, Doug, anything?
No, thank you for your time. Thank you, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll ask one more then, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, there you go.
If you could go back and have a conversation with junior cell rep Sean, what would you tell him? Knowing what you know
now. Those are always tough. It's sort of exactly what I just said. I would say, don't play the volume game. Spend more time understanding how to truly find a customer pain. There's so much out there now. It sounds like Raleigh already walked you through that, but like I said, I mean, that to me would be the biggest thing, right? If I think about the way that I sell and train people to sell, versus when I started, again, at MarketWire, coming in and just playing the volume game, how many bridges did I burn there? Because I called somebody, 200 times in a year, and they probably said, to hell with Sean and MarketWire, I'm never going to do business with them. So I would say exactly that is the more, do more research, understand, you're trying to solve a customer problem. Otherwise, you're just playing a rat race, and that rat race is even harder today, right? There's so much noise. There's so many email and voicemails. Now, I will say, shifting that today, I think there's a hybrid role that works with that. I hire a lot of folks, and I see it, particularly like at Sprout, for example. We had, I don't remember, close to 200 sellers, and you could walk in sometimes and it'd be silent, and everybody was just emailing. So don't be afraid of the phone. I still think there's a lot of value in the phone. You may never get anybody to answer, they may not call you back, but personally, I think blending email, LinkedIn, and phone, it just humanizes the process, right? Otherwise, it could be some marketing automation that's going through, and you know, Todd isn't even a human being; it's an alias, and I've seen that. I've literally had my marketing program run that, where there's a fake person, they've got a fake LinkedIn profile, and they've got a fake profile in Salesforce, and it's just marketing automation. So anyway, I think a kind of a combination of those is where I would go, I guess I'd say.
And I promise I didn't pitch Sean on what we do, so he's not just saying that because that's what we train on.
Yeah.
Literally, like I take him through the whole, like I had this thing with Kevin Grant that I did that I saved, which was this lady had sent him, it's like, just send me your pricing on your releases. And so I deconstructed, gone to her LinkedIn profile. You guys remember that one? And then it was like, we went through it and we found like how long she'd been in the company, how do we approach somebody that's been there that long time, how long she'd been in role, what are her accolades, what's her background, what is the company website, what's the 10K, all that stuff, so that he could write an effective email back, and he ended up actually closing the account. So, but it's that thing that you said, right? It's the, you know, it's just when you're from the same DNA, there's a lot of similarities. And thanks, Sean. I promise I didn't call him and tell him to say that. So
no, it's really true. I actually get still frustrated with it, right? When I see reps, email's easy, right? And I think, you know, zig when other people zag, right? If you're going to take the easy way out and try to do what everybody else is doing, you're probably going to be like whatever the numbers are, 60% of their reps not hitting their numbers, right? But if you can have good work ethic, you can be creative, you know, and you can keep the discipline, which I assume you guys have those, a lot of those traits given your backgrounds, you know, you'll be top performers. But to kind of do another layer of that, I always think sort of 3 tiers. So go kind of the company needs, then the department that person's in. So for you guys right now, it'd be sales, and then down to the individual, right? And you kind of tier those 3 layers. You can almost always find something that fits in those layers. Or if you can't, they're not a zebra.
awesome. Well, Sean, we really appreciate your time, man. We'll be in touch soon. So, you know, if you see these guys on LinkedIn, I'm sure they'll, you know, they'll connect with you if they had.
They all already did, yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, we'll continue to hopefully have you back for the next class too. But,
yeah, anytime if you want to follow up, let me know. I really appreciate you guys. Congrats on your first step into your sales careers. Best of luck.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. We're going to sign off of here so we can end this. Sean, if you want, we record these, so just for our use, we haven't posted anything on anybody yet, but I'll send this to you. If I can figure out a way to do it. I'm not that technologically savvy when it comes to all this, but I'll see if I can send it to you. If you want to, you can use it for your own purposes. Generally what we do is do like a LinkedIn post and just say, hey, met with Sean Chinksi today. I'll send you what I write. And then if you think that's fine, we'll go ahead and put it out there to be good for you. Maybe some press too. So.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks, Riley.
Well, thanks, guys. We'll talk to you.
Take care. Bye, guys.